I am Stephanie Morgan, 32 years old, and the CEO of one of the largest luxury hotel chains in the country. My parents never believed in my dreams. They wanted a doctor, not a hospitality mogul. Last night, my phone buzzed with a text from my father, "You are not welcome in our 5-star hotel." I smiled as I picked up my office phone. "Security, please revoke the Wellington family VIP access immediately. Their keycard stopped working at midnight." If you are watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from, and hit that like and subscribe button to hear how I built an empire while my parents tried to tear me down. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood on the north side of Chicago, I always had a fascination with hotels. Even at 10 years old, I would sketch floor plans of imaginary resorts on construction paper, designing grand lobbies with fountains and elegant restaurants where people would gather for memorable experiences. My bedroom walls were not covered with posters of boy bands or movie stars, but with pictures I had cut out from travel magazines showing the most luxurious hotels from around the world. My parents, Walter and Eleanor Wellington, found my obsession peculiar at best and concerning at worst. They were both medical professionals. My father was a cardiologist and my mother was a pediatric nurse. In their minds, there was no greater calling than medicine, and they had mapped out my entire life before I could even form my own opinions. I was destined to become a doctor, according to them. "Stephanie, this hotel nonsense is just a phase," my mother would say, removing my sketches from the dinner table. "You need to focus on your science fair project if you want to get into a good pre-med program someday." I remember one particular evening when I was 12. I had spent hours researching the history of the grand hotels of the early 20th century for a school presentation. When I eagerly tried to share what I had learned about the Waldorf Astoria with my parents during dinner, my father cut me off mid-sentence. "Enough about hotels, Stephanie. Did you study for your biology test tomorrow? That is what matters for your future, not some buildings where people sleep when they travel." By 16, my passion for hospitality and business had only grown stronger. I had taken business electives in high school and even created a detailed business plan for a small boutique hotel as part of an entrepreneurship class project. My teacher was impressed and encouraged me to enter it in a statewide business competition for high school students. When I brought the business plan home, proudly displaying the A+ grade and my teacher's comments about my exceptional understanding of the hospitality industry, my parents barely glanced at it. "This is what you are wasting your time on," my father said, flipping through the pages with obvious disdain. "You could be volunteering at the hospital or studying for your SATs." In a moment I will never forget, he tore the business plan in half and dropped the pieces into the trash. "This stops now, Stephanie. It is time to get serious about your future." My mother stood by, silently offering no defense or comfort. Her loyalty was always to my father first, me second. The only person who ever supported my dreams was my grandmother Beatrice, my mother's mother. Grandma B had been a businesswoman herself, running a successful bakery for 30 years before retiring. She understood entrepreneurship and the passion that drove it. During weekend visits to her small house in Evanston, she would listen intently to my hotel ideas, offering practical advice and encouragement. "Never let anyone tell you what you can and cannot achieve. Stephanie," she would say, her hands warm around mine. "Your dreams belong to you alone." When I turned 18 and it was time to apply for colleges, the tension in our house reached a breaking point. My parents had applications ready for Northwestern University of Chicago and several other schools with strong pre-med programs. I had secretly applied to Cornell's School of Hotel Administration, one of the top hospitality programs in the country. When the acceptance letter arrived, I could not contain my excitement. I waited until dinner to make my announcement, naively believing that my accomplishment would finally make them see that my path was valid. "I have something to tell you," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I have been accepted to Cornell's Hotel Administration program. It is one of the best in the world, and I am going." The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. My mother's eyes filled with tears of disappointment. "If you choose this path, you choose it alone," my father finally said, his voice cold and decisive. "We will not pay a single penny toward a degree that is worthless. Our money is for medical school, nothing else. And do not think you can live here while pursuing this foolishness," my mother added, surprisingly firm. "If you are adult enough to make this decision against our wishes, you are adult enough to support yourself completely." That night, I called Grandma B in tears. She listened calmly as I poured out my heart, then said something that changed my life. "Come over tomorrow, dear. I have something for you." The next day, as I sat at her kitchen table, she handed me an envelope containing $500 and a small gold locket that had belonged to her mother. "It is not much, but it is a start," she said. "The money will help with immediate expenses, and the locket is to remind you that strong women run in our family. Your parents cannot see your vision yet, but someday they will. In the meantime, you forge ahead." A week later, with 2 suitcases and Grandma B's blessing, I left my childhood home. My parents did not even come downstairs to say goodbye. As I closed the front door behind me, I made a silent promise to myself that I would build something so extraordinary that they would be forced to acknowledge that I had made the right choice. I had no idea then just how completely that promise would be fulfilled, or how ironically our paths would cross again years later. The transition from my comfortable suburban life to complete independence was jarring. With only $500 to my name, I had to be strategic. I deferred my acceptance to Cornell for a year, to establish residency in New York and save money. During that year, I moved to Ithaca and worked 3 jobs simultaneously. By day, I was a front desk clerk at a budget motel near the highway, learning the basics of hotel operations from the ground up. Evenings, I waited tables at a busy restaurant downtown, studying how food service and customer satisfaction worked in real time. On weekends, I cleaned rooms at yet another hotel, understanding the importance of cleanliness and attention to detail in guest experiences. My first apartment was a tiny studio above a laundromat so small that my twin bed nearly touched both walls. The kitchen consisted of a mini fridge, a hot plate, and a sink that dripped constantly. Dinner was often ramen noodles with whatever vegetables were on sale that week. I washed my uniforms in the laundromat below when I could afford it, or in my sink when I could not. Despite the hardship, I felt a sense of freedom I had never experienced before. Every decision was mine alone. Every dollar I earned represented my own efforts. Every mistake was a lesson I would not have learned under my parents' controlled environment. I called Grandma B weekly, sharing my experiences and challenges. She always listened with interest and never once suggested I should give up and go home. "You are building something," she would say. "Not just a career, but character." When I finally began my classes at Cornell the following fall, I continued working part-time at a local hotel to supplement my student loans and grants. My classmates often complained about the workload, but to me the education was a privilege worth every sacrifice. I graduated in the top 5% of my class, having already accumulated more practical experience than many of my peers. With my degree in hand, I set my sights on New York City, the hotel capital of America. My first professional position was as a management trainee at the Westbrook, a boutique hotel in Manhattan. The salary was modest, but I was determined to learn every aspect of hotel management from the inside out. I worked 14-hour days volunteering for every shift and project available. While my colleagues complained about demanding guests or working holidays, I saw each challenge as an opportunity to prove myself. 6 months into my position, during a particularly busy weekend when we were short-staffed, I met Jessica Harris, the regional director for the hotel group. She had come to evaluate the property and found me simultaneously checking in guests, directing bellhops, and solving a room service crisis. "You are either desperate for overtime or genuinely love this chaos," she remarked, watching me handle 3 tasks at once. "The latter," I replied with a smile. "I believe chaos creates opportunity for innovation." When a guest complained about waiting too long for check-in, I had implemented an impromptu mobile check-in process, using a tablet to process guests in the lounge where they could enjoy complimentary champagne. Jessica was impressed by this on-the-spot solution. "You know that is not in the standard operating procedure," she said after the rush had subsided. "No, but it should be," I answered confidently. We turned a potential negative review into a premium experience. "I have other ideas too, if you are interested." That conversation led to a series of meetings where Jessica became both mentor and advocate for my ideas. Within a year, several of my customer service innovations had been implemented across all 12 hotels in the group, and I had been promoted to assistant front office manager. By 24, I had advanced to assistant general manager, the youngest in the company's history. My salary had doubled. allowing me to move from my shared apartment in Queens to a small but respectable one-bedroom in Brooklyn. For the first time, I felt financially stable. With this stability came thoughts of reconciliation with my parents. It had been nearly 6 years since I had left home, with only sporadic and cold exchanges during holidays. Perhaps now that I was established in my career, they would finally accept my choices. I called my mother on her birthday, purposely keeping the conversation light and positive. I told her about my promotion and asked about their lives. Her responses were polite but distant. When I mentioned possibly visiting Chicago, she hesitated. "Your father is still very hurt by your choices, Stephanie. I think it is best to give it more time." A similar call to my father on Father's Day went even worse. "A hotel manager is just a glorified innkeeper," he said dismissively. "Call us when you have accomplished something meaningful." Their rejection still stung, but I was no longer the vulnerable 18-year-old desperate for approval. I had built a life they knew nothing about, and I was proud of it with or without their blessing. 2 years later, I received the call that would change everything again. Grandma Bia had suffered a stroke. By the time I could arrange emergency leave and fly to Chicago, she had passed away. My parents and I maintained a frigid civility at the funeral, standing on opposite sides of the grave. The reading of her will brought another surprise. Grandma B had left me her modest savings of $75,000 and a letter that the attorney handed me privately. "My dearest Stephanie," the letter began, "if you are reading this, I am gone, but my belief in you remains. This money was to be my retirement cushion, but I can think of no better investment than you and your dreams. Perhaps now is the time to build that hotel you have always talked about. Remember, empires begin with a single brick. All my love, Grandma B." I wept on the flight back to New York, mourning her loss, but also filled with determination. The inheritance was not enough to build or buy a hotel outright, but it was enough for a down payment enough to begin. I made a decision that night, somewhere over Pennsylvania, that I would honor her faith in me by taking the biggest risk of my life. With $75,000 in capital, I began researching properties that had potential but were undervalued. My target was a small, struggling bed and breakfast in an up-and-coming neighborhood in Brooklyn. The 30-room property had good bones but suffered from outdated decor, poor management, and non-existent marketing. The asking price was $800,000, far beyond my means. Armed with Grandma B's inheritance and a detailed business plan, I approached 6 different banks for financing. The first 5 rejected me outright. I was too young, too inexperienced as an owner, and the property was too risky. The 6th banker, an older woman named Patricia Donovan, actually took the time to review my plan thoroughly. "You have done your homework," she acknowledged, "but I still cannot approve this loan without more collateral or an experienced partner." That conversation led me to Daniel Patterson, a former guest at the Westbrook, who had mentioned he was looking to diversify his real estate investments. He had been impressed with how I handled a crisis during his stay when the hotel lost power during a summer storm. I pitched him my vision over coffee, explaining how I planned to transform the tired B&B into a boutique urban retreat catering to business travelers seeking an alternative to chain hotels. To my surprise, he agreed to partner with me, providing an additional $100,000 in exchange for 20% equity. With Daniel's backing and a stronger application, I secured the bank loan. I also brought in Laura Fields, a savvy attorney I had met through Jessica, who helped negotiate the purchase price down to $750,000, based on necessary repairs and upgrades. The day we closed on the property was surreal. I stood in the shabby lobby holding the keys, simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. This was it, my first hotel. The previous owners had called it the Brooklyn Manor, a name as tired as the floral wallpaper. I renamed it the Morgan, simple and memorable. The renovation process was grueling. To save money, I lived in one of the rooms and worked alongside the contractors. I learned to tile bathrooms, paint walls, and refinish hardwood floors. Every decision, from the thread count of the sheets to the brand of coffee served at breakfast, was mine to make. Instead of trying to compete with luxury chains, I focused on creating something they could not: authentic local experiences. Each room was named after a Brooklyn neighborhood and featured work from local artists. The small restaurant space was leased to a promising young chef with a farm-to-table concept. I partnered with local businesses to offer guests exclusive experiences, from brewery tours to artisan workshops. My years in corporate hotels had shown me what frustrated travelers the most, and I built solutions into the very fabric of the Morgan. Universal chargers built into nightstands. Bathrooms with adequate counter space and lighting designed for applying makeup. Blackout curtains that actually blocked all light. Breakfast available from 5 a.m. until noon to accommodate both early risers and those who needed to sleep in. The grand opening was set for June 15th, and I was terrified that no one would come. Jessica pulled strings to get a mention in a few travel blogs, and Daniel invited business associates, but I prepared myself for a disappointing turnout. To my shock, we were fully booked the first weekend. A last-minute mention in New York Magazine's Best New Hotels section had created unexpected buzz. Guests were charmed by the personalized service and attention to detail, and the reviews were glowing. Within 6 months, the Morgan was operating at 87% occupancy, well above the industry average for a new property. By the end of the first year, we had turned a modest profit, and I was able to buy back 5% of Daniel's equity stake. The success of the Morgan provided the proof of concept I needed to expand. 3 years after opening, I secured funding for a second location, converting an old factory building in Philadelphia into the Morgan Loft. This property built on everything that worked at the Brooklyn location, while adding unique elements that reflected its industrial heritage. The Morgan Loft was an even bigger success, reaching profitability in just 9 months. Industry publications began to take notice, and I was invited to speak at hospitality conferences about boutique hotel development and the changing preferences of business travelers. By my 30th birthday, Morgan Hospitality Group consisted of 5 properties across the Northeast, each unique but united by a commitment to personalized service and authentic local experiences. My net worth on paper had crossed into 7 figures, though I still lived modestly, reinvesting most profits back into the business. The turning point came when Luxury Travel Quarterly published a feature naming Morgan Hospitality Group as the hotel chain most likely to disrupt the industry in the next decade. The article praised our innovative approach and predicted major growth. What I did not expect was who would read that article and what would happen next. A representative from Blackstone Capital Partners reached out expressing interest in providing substantial investment to accelerate our expansion. During our initial meeting, they mentioned another opportunity that might interest me, a struggling luxury hotel chain that was available for acquisition at a favorable price due to mismanagement and declining bookings. Wellington Luxury Hotels, the Blackstone representative said, sliding a folder across the table. 12 properties, all in prime locations. The brand has heritage but needs revitalization. Given your track record of breathing new life into properties, we think you would be the perfect operator. I nearly dropped my coffee when I saw the name. Wellington, my parents' surname. It could not possibly be related to them, I thought. It had to be a coincidence. But as I reviewed the materials, I discovered a connection I never could have imagined. Wellington Luxury Hotels had been founded 30 years earlier by Harold Wellington, my father's distant cousin. The chain had been successful for decades before falling into decline under the leadership of Harold's son. What the Blackstone representatives did not know, and what I discovered through my own research, was that my parents had invested a significant portion of their retirement savings into Wellington Luxury Hotels 5 years earlier, drawn by the Portings stays, family connection, and promises of high returns. They now sat on the advisory board, enjoying the prestige of association with luxury properties, while their investment slowly diminished in value. The irony was almost too perfect. The daughter they had dismissed for pursuing hospitality was now in position to acquire the very hotel chain they had tied their fortunes to. I structured the deal carefully, creating a holding company that would shield my identity during the acquisition process. With Blackstone's backing and my own company's resources, I completed the purchase of Wellington Luxury Hotels for $120 million, the largest business transaction of my life. The acquisition of Wellington Luxury Hotels was kept deliberately low profile. I worked through a series of shell companies and legal entities to ensure my name was not directly associated with the purchase. This was standard practice in many hotel acquisitions, but in my case, there was the added motivation of keeping my involvement unknown to certain board members. My parents, Walter and Eleanor Wellington, had invested $2 million, their entire retirement fund, into Wellington Luxury Hotels during its heyday. They had been granted permanent VIP status by the previous owner, Harold Wellington, which entitled them to complimentary stays room upgrades and special treatment at any property in the chain. This status had been written into the corporate bylaws as part of their investment agreement, an unusual perk that reflected the family connection rather than sound business practice. When I discovered this arrangement during due diligence, I had a decision to make. I could revoke their status, immediately exposing my ownership and forcing a confrontation, or I could maintain their privileges temporarily while I assessed the situation. I chose the latter partly out of business pragmatism and partly out of curiosity. What kind of guests were my parents? How did they treat the staff who served them? The answers came soon enough. Under the guise of a standard post-acquisition assessment, I had monitoring systems put in place. Guest satisfaction scores, staff reports, and security footage gave me insight into how VIPs, including my parents, behaved on property. What I discovered was disappointing, but not entirely surprising. My parents had embraced their VIP status with an entitlement that bordered on tyrannical. They visited the Chicago flagship property, the Wellington Grand, at least twice monthly for dinner and stayed in suites several times per quarter. Each visit was marked by excessive demands, complaints, and condescension toward staff. Monitoring reports showed they routinely requested room changes 3 or 4 times before settling on a suite, finding imaginary flaws in perfectly appointed rooms. They sent back food in the restaurant with vague complaints, demanded off-menu items at busy times, and expected instantaneous service regardless of how full the hotel was. These Wellington VIPs are becoming a real problem, Sophia Williams, the general manager of the Chicago property, said during a conference call, not knowing I was the new owner. They treat the place like their personal kingdom and the staff like servants. Last week, Mrs. Wellington reduced our new front desk agent to tears because the welcome amenity had dark chocolate instead of milk chocolate. I should have been shocked, but somehow I was not. The parents who had dismissed my dreams and demanded perfection had simply transferred those expectations to a new target. The difference was that now they were affecting people who worked for me, people I respected and valued. I arranged to visit the Chicago property Incognito, staying in a standard room under a different name, while my parents coincidentally were booked into their usual suite. From the hotel bar, I watched them enter the lobby, my father snapping his fingers for assistance with their minimal luggage, my mother inspecting the floral arrangements with obvious disapproval. Wellington party, my father announced at the front desk loudly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. VIP status. We will take the presidential suite tonight. The front desk agent, professional and poised, explained that the presidential suite was already occupied by a diplomat. Unacceptable, my mother responded. We always get the presidential when it is available. Check again. I have checked, Mrs. Wellington. It is definitely occupied. We have prepared the ambassador suite for you instead, which has the lake view you prefer. My father leaned across the counter. Do you know how much money we have invested in this hotel? We are practically owners here. Find another room for this diplomat person. I watched Sophia approach, alerted by the commotion. She smoothly intervened, greeting my parents warmly while firmly supporting her staff member. The ambassador suite has just been renovated with all new furnishings. I think you will find it even more to your liking than the presidential. And I have arranged for a special dinner in the restaurant this evening, complimentary, of course. This placated them temporarily, but I continued to observe their behavior throughout their stay. They complained about housekeeping, demanded staff attend to them before other guests, and made loud comments about declining standards since the new management had taken over. The final straw came during their third night, when they hosted a dinner for 4 other couples in the hotel restaurant. I sat at a corner table unrecognized by the parents who had not seen me in nearly a decade now, with different hair designer clothes and the confidence they had tried to suppress. Yes, we practically own this place, my father was saying to his guests, voice carrying across the half-empty restaurant. Wellington is our family name after all. Though between us, the new corporate owners do not know the first thing about luxury hospitality. Bean counters, all of them. My mother nodded in agreement. The service has gone downhill dramatically. We are considering pulling our investment, actually. Such a shame. Imagine if our daughter Stephanie had pursued this industry like she wanted. She would probably be managing some roadside motel by now, changing sheets and unclogging toilets. The table erupted in laughter, and I felt a flush of anger rise from my chest to my face. But along with the anger came a strange sense of power. They had no idea that their practically owning the place was a sad delusion, that their investment was already under my control, that the daughter they mocked was now their boss. I paid my bill and walked toward the exit, purposely passing close to their table. My father glanced up, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Stephanie," he said, squinting at me. I stopped, smiling politely. "Good evening." "My God, it is you," my mother said, looking me up and down with obvious surprise at my appearance. "What are you doing here? Do you live in Chicago now?" "Just visiting," I replied. "I am in the hotel business, as you might remember. Checking out the competition." "Hotel business," my father repeated with a smirk. "What are you, a concierge somewhere?" "Something like that," I answered vaguely. "Enjoy your evening." As I walked away, I heard him say to the table, "That was our daughter, the one who threw away a medical career to work in hotels. Stubborn girl." The next morning, I met with Sophia in her office, finally revealing my identity as the new owner. She was shocked, but quickly understood why I had kept my presence low-key. "Those difficult VIPs last night," I said. "They are my parents, and they do not know I own Wellington Luxury Hotels now." "Your parents," she repeated, eyes wide. "The ones who made Julia cry last month over chocolate?" "The very same. And I saw enough last night to make some decisions. They were extremely rude to you and your staff. I heard them misrepresenting their relationship to the hotel and disparaging our management." Sophia looked uncomfortable. "Miss Morgan, they are still your parents. I do not want to cause a family rift." "The rift has existed for 15 years, I assured her. "And please call me Stephanie. I am going to return to New York today, but I want you to monitor their behavior closely. If they cross any lines with staff, I want to know immediately." I returned to New York that afternoon. 2 weeks later, I received an urgent call from Sophia. "Your mother made one of our housekeepers cry," she reported. "The woman has worked here for 12 years with an impeccable record. Mrs. Wellington claimed she stole a bracelet, which we later found in the bathroom drain. She demanded the housekeeper be fired on the spot. When I refused, she threatened to call the CEO. That was the final straw. I had seen and heard enough. It was time to address the situation directly. I booked a flight to Chicago for the following week, planning to have a private conversation with my parents about their behavior and possibly reveal my ownership if necessary. Before I could implement this plan, however, my phone buzzed with a text message from my father. "Saw you snooping around our hotel. The management tells us you claim to be in the hotel business. You are not welcome in our 5-star hotel. Your lies and pretensions are not appreciated here." I stared at the message in disbelief. They still, after all this time, refused to acknowledge my career or success. They still thought of Wellington as their hotel. And now they were banning me from a property that I owned. Something snapped inside me. Years of rejection, dismissal, and now this absurd attempt to exclude me from my own business. I picked up my office phone and called the head of security for the entire Wellington chain. "This is Stephanie Morgan, CEO of Wellington Luxury Hotels. I need you to immediately revoke the VIP status for Walter and Eleanor Wellington at all properties. Disable their keycards effective midnight tonight. Alert all property managers that any comps or special treatment must be approved directly by me going forward." It was time to end the charade and show my parents exactly who owned their hotel. The incident with the housekeeper represented everything that was wrong with how my parents viewed the world. Martina Alvarez had been cleaning rooms at the Wellington Grand for 12 years, arriving each day at 5 a.m. to ensure everything was perfect for guests. She had received commendations for finding and returning valuable items guests had left behind. Her attention to detail was legendary among the staff. And my mother had reduced this dedicated professional to tears with false accusations and threats. According to Sophia's detailed report, my mother had left an expensive tennis bracelet in the bathroom where it had slipped down the sink drain. Rather than considering she might have misplaced it, she immediately accused Martina of theft, demanding her room be searched and threatening to call the police. "I know how these people are," my mother had apparently said within earshot of other staff. "They come to our country and think they can take whatever they want." The racist undertone of the comment made my blood boil. Martina was a U.S. citizen who had put 2 children through college working at the hotel. Sophia had handled the situation professionally, calmly suggesting they check the room thoroughly before making accusations. When maintenance removed the drain trap and found the bracelet, my mother had not apologized. Instead, she complained that the situation had ruined her morning and demanded a free night's stay to compensate for her distress. This was the breaking point for me. I had been willing to have a rational conversation with my parents about their behavior, perhaps even work towards some kind of reconciliation. But this incident, combined with their text message banning me from the property, pushed me beyond diplomacy. The following morning, I flew to Chicago with a clear plan in mind. I checked into a different hotel and contacted Sophia to arrange everything. My parents were scheduled to check in that afternoon for a 3-night stay. They would find everything normal until precisely midnight, when their keycards would stop working. The next morning, they would be directed to a meeting in the presidential suite where I would be waiting with my executive team. While waiting for this confrontation, I decided to visit the hotel to speak with Martina personally. I found her on her break in the staff cafeteria, a petite woman with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Miss Alvarez," I said, sitting across from her. "I am Stephanie Morgan, the CEO of Wellington Hotels." Her eyes widened with surprise. "The owner, here in the cafeteria?" "Yes," I smiled. "I wanted to personally apologize for how you were treated by Mrs. Wellington. What happened was unacceptable and does not reflect our company values." "It is not your fault, Miss Morgan," she said graciously. "Some guests are difficult." "They were not just any guests, Martina. They are my parents." Her hand flew to her mouth in shock. "Your parents, Dios mío, I had no idea." "Neither do they actually," I replied with a wry smile. "They do not know I own the hotel chain. They have never respected my career in hospitality. But that is about to change. I wanted you to know that I value your service here, and I have authorized a bonus for you equal to 2 weeks' salary to apologize for their behavior." Tears welled in her eyes, but these were different from the ones my mother had caused. "Thank you, Miss Morgan. That is very generous." "It is deserved," I assured her. "And please call me Stephanie." As I left the staff area, I passed the bank of elevators just as they opened to reveal my parents stepping out returning from shopping on Michigan Avenue. They were so engrossed in conversation they nearly walked into me. "Stephanie," my father said, genuine surprise on his face. "What are you doing here? Did you not get my message? You are not welcome here." "I got it," I replied calmly. "I just chose to ignore it." "This is unacceptable," my mother hissed, looking around to see if anyone was watching this confrontation. "You cannot just show up at our hotel and embarrass us like this." "Your hotel?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, our hotel," my father insisted. "We are major investors and advisory board members. We have certain standards to uphold, and having our estranged daughter pretending to be in the hotel business is not part of the image we want to project." I took a deep breath, momentarily tempted to reveal everything right there in the corridor. But I had a plan, and I intended to stick to it. "I will be on my way then," I said with a pleasant smile. "Enjoy your stay." As I walked away, I heard my father mutter, "The nerve of that girl, always trying to insert herself where she does not belong." That evening, from my room at a competing hotel across the street, I worked on my presentation for the morning meeting while monitoring texts from Sophia. My parents had dined in the restaurant, sent back 2 bottles of wine as unacceptable, and complained that their Sweets Lake view was obstructed by weather. Typical behavior, apparently. At 11:55 p.m., I sent the authorization to security to deactivate their keycards. At 12:15 a.m., I received confirmation that it was done. Now I just had to wait for morning and the inevitable complaint. Sure enough, at 7:38 a.m., Sophia texted me Wellington keycards not working. They tried to return from the fitness center and are locked out. Front desk following protocol and saying system is down. Maintenance has been dispatched to let them in manually. They are not happy. Perfect, I texted back. See you at 9 a.m. I arrived at the hotel at 8:30, entering through the service entrance and taking the freight elevator to the presidential suite, where my executive team was already assembled. I had flown in Daniel Patterson now, my CFO, and Laura Fields, my chief legal officer, along with the heads of operations and marketing. Sophia joined us, looking nervous but determined. "Are we really doing this?" Daniel asked, straightening his tie. They are still your parents, Steph. That is precisely why we are doing this, I replied, checking my appearance in a mirror. I had chosen my outfit carefully, a tailored black suit, crisp white blouse, and the gold locket Grandma B had given me years ago. They need to understand that actions have consequences, especially when those actions hurt people I am responsible for. At precisely 9 a.m., there was a sharp knock at the door. Sophia opened it to reveal my parents both red-faced with anger. "We demand to speak to the manager," my father began, then stopped short when he saw the room full of executives. "What is this?" We were told the hotel manager wanted to discuss our concerns. "Please come in, Mr. and Mrs. Wellington," Sophia said professionally. "Our CEO would like to address your concerns personally." My mother stepped into the room, eyes darting between the well-dressed executives, until they landed on me standing at the head of the conference table. "Stephanie," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "What are you doing here? Are you working for the hotel now? Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke, Mother," I replied calmly. "Please both of you take a seat. We have much to discuss." The silence in the presidential suite was thick enough to cut with a knife as my parents stood frozen in the doorway. My father's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and the beginning stages of anger. My mother clutched her designer purse like a shield, eyes darting between me and the executives seated around the table. "I will not be ordered to sit down by my own daughter," my father finally sputtered. "What kind of game are you playing, Stephanie? How dare you embarrass us like this?" "This is not a game," I replied, my voice steady. "And no one is being embarrassed unless you choose to make it so. Please sit down so we can discuss the situation like adults." Reluctantly, they took the two empty chairs at the far end of the table as far from me as possible. My father leaned forward, addressing Sophia rather than me. "Miss Williams, I demand an explanation. Why is our daughter involved in this meeting? We asked to speak with hotel management about our key cards malfunctioning and being locked out of our room." Before Sophia could respond, I interjected. "She is hotel management, Father, and she reports to me. Allow me to formally introduce myself. I am Stephanie Morgan, Chief Executive Officer and majority owner of Wellington Luxury Hotels." My mother gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "That is ridiculous. Wellington Hotels is owned by Blackstone and the Wellington Family Trust. We are on the advisory board. We would know if you were involved." Laura Fields, my chief legal officer, slid folders across the table to each of them. These documents outline the ownership structure of Wellington Luxury Hotels following its acquisition last year by Morgan Hospitality Group, which is owned and operated by Stephanie Morgan. As you can see on page 3, the acquisition was conducted through a holding company, which is why the transition appeared seamless to most stakeholders. My father flipped through the documents, his face growing paler with each page. My mother simply stared at me, her expression unreadable. "This cannot be legal," my father finally said, pushing the folder away. "We were never consulted. We have investment rights." "Your investment remains intact," Daniel explained. "The value of your shares has actually increased by 17% since the acquisition, as the financial statements in Section 4 demonstrate. The only thing that has changed is the management structure. And certain VIP privileges," I added. "Which brings us to why your keycards stopped working last night." I stood and walked to the window, looking out at Lake Michigan for a moment before turning back to face my parents. "For the past year, I have observed how you treat the staff of this hotel. I have read reports, viewed security footage, and heard first-hand accounts. The behavior I have witnessed is unacceptable from any guest, but particularly from people associated with ownership." My father's face flushed red again. "How dare you spy on us? We have every right to expect certain standards." "Expecting standards and abusing staff are very different things," I countered. "Last month, you reduced a front desk agent to tears over chocolate. 2 days ago, Mother, you falsely accused a housekeeper of theft and made racist insinuations about her. You have sent back perfectly prepared meals, demanded room changes for imaginary flaws, and consistently treated the people who work for me with contempt." "The people who work for you," my mother repeated, seeming to finally grasp the reality of the situation. "You really do own this hotel." "Not just this hotel," I corrected her. "All 12 Wellington properties, plus the 7 original Morgan hotels I built from scratch. I employ over 3,000 people across the country, people whose livelihoods and well-being I take very seriously." My father shook his head, still struggling to accept what he was hearing. This is absurd. You were going to be a doctor. We had your life planned out. Then you threw it all away for this hotel nonsense. This hotel nonsense, I repeated, has made me a multimillionaire before the age of 35. The company I built is valued at over $200 million. I have been featured in Forbes Business Insider and Hospitality Monthly as one of the most innovative leaders in the industry. I pulled out my phone and opened a series of photographs, placing it on the table between us. This was my first property, a 30-room bed and breakfast in Brooklyn that I purchased with Grandma B's inheritance and renovated largely with my own hands. This is the Philadelphia location that doubled our revenue in 1 year. This is me receiving the Hospitality Innovation Award last spring. This is the house I just purchased in the Hamptons. Each image seemed to land like a physical blow. My parents had always measured success in very specific ways: degrees from prestigious universities, homes in the right neighborhoods, recognition from the right people. I was showing them that I had achieved all of that, just not on their terms. When I left home at 18, you told me I would fail. I continued, my voice growing softer. You said I was throwing my life away on a worthless dream. Do you remember that day? I do. I remember every word. I remember crying on the bus to Grandma B's house, wondering if you were right. A memory surfaced, sharp and clear. My father at the dining room table, tearing my business plan in half. This stops now, Stephanie. It is time to get serious about your future. I remember when you tore up my business plan, I said, watching my father flinch slightly at the memory. I was 16 and had worked for months on it. My teacher thought it showed exceptional promise. You thought it was garbage. Another memory, my mother standing silently by as my father raged about my college choice. If you are adult enough to make this decision against our wishes, you are adult enough to support yourself completely. I remember when you cut me off completely. I continued, now looking at my mother. No financial support, no emotional support. I worked 3 jobs my first year in New York. I lived above a laundromat and ate ramen for dinner most nights. Did you ever wonder if I was okay? Did you ever worry? My mother's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. When Grandma B died, you could barely look at me at the funeral. Did you know she left me her savings with a note encouraging me to build my first hotel? She believed in me when you would not. I returned to my seat at the head of the table, closing the portfolio of documents before me. Yesterday, you texted me that I was not welcome in your 5-star hotel. The irony would be comical if it were not so sad. You have been enjoying VIP status at my hotels, treating my staff poorly and pretending to have an ownership stake that is a fraction of what you represent. So what now? My father asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. You have had your revenge. You have humiliated us in front of your employees. Are you going to throw us out? Publish this story in the business press, ruin our reputation in Chicago? I studied him for a moment. The man who had once seemed so powerful and intimidating to me now looked smaller, somehow defensive and uncertain. This is not about revenge, I said finally. This is about boundaries and consequences. Your VIP status has been revoked because you abused it. Your key cards no longer work because you cannot be trusted with unfettered access. But what happens next is entirely up to you. I nodded to Sophia, who produced 2 new key cards and placed them on the table. These are standard guest key cards for your current suite, I explained. You are welcome to remain for the duration of your planned stay as paying guests. Your investment in the company remains secure and will continue to grow under my management, but there are conditions. I stood again, making eye contact with each of my parents in turn. You will treat every member of my staff with the respect they deserve. You will make reservations like any other guest. You will pay for your rooms, meals, and services. And you will never again pretend to have operational authority at any of my properties. My father reached for the key cards, but I placed my hand over them before he could take them. I need your verbal agreement to these terms. He hesitated, 15 years of stubbornness warring with the reality before him. Finally, he nodded. Agreed. Mother, I prompted. She looked up, tears now streaming freely down her face. Yes, of course. Agreed. I removed my hand, allowing them to take the key cards. There is one more thing. I would like you to personally apologize to Martina Alvarez, the housekeeper you accused of theft. She will be on duty this afternoon. My mother's face flushed with embarrassment, but she nodded. I will. Good, I said, standing, to indicate the meeting was concluding. My team will now return to their regular duties. I would like a few minutes alone with my parents. As the executives filed out, I saw Daniel give me a subtle thumbs up. Sophia was the last to leave, closing the door quietly behind her. For a long moment, the three of us sat in silence, the weight of 15 years of estrangement hanging in the air. I had imagined this confrontation so many times, played it out in my mind during sleepless nights and long flights. But now that it was happening, I felt strangely calm. You built all this yourself? My father finally asked, genuine curiosity in his voice for perhaps the first time, without our help. Yes, I replied simply. Every step of the way. We had no idea, my mother said softly. We thought. You thought I had failed, I finished for her. Because in your minds, there was only one path to success, and I chose a different one. My father stared at his hands for a long moment. I was wrong, he said, the words seeming to physically pain him. About your choice, about the hotel business, about you. Coming from a man who had never admitted error in his life, these words were seismic. I felt something shift inside me, a hardness beginning to soften ever so slightly. We both were, my mother added. We were so sure we knew what was best for you, so convinced that our path was the only right one. And look what you have accomplished without us. Not just without you, I corrected gently. Despite you. Despite being told I would fail. Despite having no support when I needed it most. They absorbed this truth in silence. The path to healing would be long and uncertain, but at least now it existed, where before there had been only a wall. I have a dinner meeting tonight, I said, gathering my portfolio. But perhaps if you are free tomorrow, we could have breakfast, begin to get to know each other again as adults. My father nodded, a gesture so small, yet so significant. We would like that, he said, speaking for both of them, as he always had, but with a new humility in his voice. As I walked to the door, my mother called after me. Stephanie, I am proud of you. I should have said that years ago, but I am saying it now. I am so very proud of you. The words I had longed to hear for 15 years finally spoken aloud. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and stepped out into the hallway, closing the door gently behind me. The breakfast meeting the following morning was awkward but civil. We met in a private dining room at the hotel, the three of us seated at a table that felt both too small and too large simultaneously. My parents arrived exactly on time, dressed more casually than I had seen them in years, a small but noticeable attempt to shed the formality that had always characterized our relationship. Thank you for meeting us, my mother began after we had ordered. We were not sure you would. I considered canceling, I admitted. Part of me wanted to say everything I needed to say yesterday and then walk away for good. Why did you not? My father asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. I touched the gold locket at my throat, Grandma B's parting gift, because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you, and because I think Grandma B would have wanted me to at least try. My mother's eyes misted at the mention of her mother. She always understood you better than we did. She listened, I replied simply. She saw me for who I was, not who she wanted me to be. Our food arrived, providing a momentary reprieve from the intensity of the conversation. As we began to eat, I decided to establish clear parameters for whatever relationship might be possible going forward. I want to be direct about something I said, setting down my fork. What happened yesterday changed things, but it did not erase the past 15 years. I am not interested in pretending those years did not happen or that the hurt they caused does not still affect me. My father nodded slowly. That is fair. If we are going to have any kind of relationship moving forward, it needs to be based on mutual respect. That means respecting my career, my choices, and the boundaries I set. It also means respecting the people who work for me. I heard you apologize to Martina yesterday. My mother looked down at her plate. Yes, it was. Humbling. She was very gracious, more than I deserved. She is an exceptional person, I agreed. One of thousands who make my hotels successful. Their well-being matters to me. We understand that now, my father said, and we respect it. Respect you. Your accomplishments are extraordinary, Stephanie. I spent the night thinking about how much vision and determination it must have taken to build what you have built. Coming from him, these words carried weight. My father had never been generous with praise even when I brought home perfect report cards or won academic competitions. That he was acknowledging my success now represented a significant shift. "What would you like this relationship to look like going forward?" my mother asked tentatively. "We have missed so much of your life." That was a choice, I reminded her gently but firmly. Your choice. I reached out several times in the early years. You chose to maintain the estrangement. She nodded, accepting this truth. You are right, we did. And I cannot tell you how much I regret that now. I think we start small, I suggested after a moment of consideration. Regular communication. Perhaps dinner when I am in Chicago or when you visit New York. I am not ready for holiday gatherings or big family reconciliations. I need to see consistent change first. That seems reasonable, my father agreed, surprising me with his lack of pushback. We will follow your lead on this. We finished breakfast with lighter conversation. I shared a few stories about the early days of building my first hotel, and they asked thoughtful questions about the business. By the time we parted, a tentative bridge had been constructed over the chasm of our estrangement. As the months passed, this bridge slowly strengthened. My parents kept their word about respecting hotel staff, now making reservations and paying for their stays like any other guests. Occasionally, when I knew they were visiting, I would authorize a complimentary upgrade or special amenity, not as an entitlement, but as a genuine gesture of goodwill. Our communication became more regular. Sunday phone calls became a routine, sometimes brief and practical, other times longer and more meaningful. During one such call about 6 months after our confrontation, my father asked a question that surprised me. Would you be willing to give us a tour of your New York properties next month? We would like to see where it all started for you. This request represented a monumental shift. My father, who had once torn up my hotel business plan in disgust, now wanted to see the fruits of that dream firsthand. When they visited, I personally showed them the Morgan, my first property. I told them the stories of sleeping in one of the rooms during renovations, of learning to tile bathrooms myself to save money, of the terrifying and exhilarating feeling of opening day. I wish we had been there, my mother said softly as we stood in the lobby. I wish we had supported you from the beginning. So do I replied honestly. But perhaps we would not be standing here today if you had. Perhaps I needed to do it entirely on my own to become the person I am now. Over dinner that evening, my father asked to see photos of the early days. I showed them images of my tiny apartment above the laundromat, of me covered in paint during renovations, of the grand opening with a line of guests waiting to check in. You look so happy in these, my mother observed, studying a photo of me beaming in front of the Morgan's original sign. Even when you were struggling. I was happy, I confirmed. Terrified and exhausted, but happy. I was building something I believed in. As we said goodbye at the end of their visit, my father did something he had not done since I was a small child. He hugged me somewhat awkwardly, but with genuine feeling. I am sorry, Stephanie, he said quietly, for not seeing who you really were, for trying to force you into a mold that was never meant for you. Thank you, I replied, surprised by how much these simple words meant to me. That means a lot. The healing process continued gradually. There were still moments of tension, old patterns that threatened to reemerge, but we were all making a conscious effort to build something new and healthier. A year after the confrontation in Chicago, I invited my parents to attend the grand opening of my newest property, the Morgan Sky in Boston. To my surprise and pleasure, they not only attended but took genuine interest in the details of the development process, asking insightful questions and complimenting specific design elements. During the reception, I overheard my father talking to Daniel, my CFO and longtime friend. She always had this vision, even as a child, he was saying. We just could not see it then. But look what she has created. It is extraordinary. These words, not spoken to impress me, but expressed genuinely to someone else, confirmed that the change in my parents was real and lasting. They had come to respect not just my success, but the path I had chosen to achieve it. The journey from that text message, "You are not welcome in our 5-star hotel," to this moment of genuine pride and connection had been long and at times painful. The wounds of 15 years could not be healed overnight, and some scars would always remain. but we had found a way forward based on truth, boundaries, and mutual respect. As I watch my parents now chatting comfortably with my executive team at hotel openings or sending thoughtful messages about industry news they think might interest me, I reflect on the lessons of our complicated journey. I learned that sometimes the people who should support you the most are the ones who understand you the least. I learned that success is not about proving others wrong, but about proving yourself right. I learned that forgiveness does not require forgetting, and that healthy boundaries are the foundation of any meaningful reconciliation. Most importantly, I learned that my grandmother was right all those years ago. Empires do begin with a single brick, whether that brick is a small inheritance, a discarded dream, or the courage to walk away from those who cannot see your vision. If you are watching this and facing your own challenges with family who do not support your dreams, remember that your path is your own to choose. Success is rarely a straight line, and the obstacles placed by those closest to you are often the most difficult to overcome. But with determination, resilience, and belief in yourself, you can build something extraordinary even if you have to do it alone. Have you ever had to prove yourself to family members who doubted your dreams? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that the most powerful validation comes not from others, but from within yourself.